Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, for coming. We'll get started on art and ecology. Where do we stand? My notebook. Well, first of all, I want to just say thank you to everyone for being here, but also this has been an amazing experience curating, being one of the curators for the Noor Festival. Really amazing and so ambitious, and allowed me to do a lot of work that would often take years to develop and plan and put together, and here we are in 6 months, boom, Janet Eckelman. So I think Janet and I live in Boston. My son goes to school down the street from your house, yet we have never spent so much time together in Boston. Yeah, we're here. Yeah, and then we have Sebastián, originally from Colombia, curator, part-time artist, collaborator, and very excited to learn more about both of your practices and what you're doing. So I would like to start with Janet, actually. Because your work is very unique. There aren't a lot of flowy sculptures out there, right? A sculpture that you kind of look like you're wearing, one of your sculptures.
This is the sample I just got from a museum for their store. So it is in fact made from my digital drawings for the work.
Is your mic on? Let me see. Hello? Can we turn mic 2 on, please? Sorry, I just want you to be heard. Oh, here we have a technician coming. No worries.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
Go.
So you were saying that this is a prototype.
This is actually the sample of merchandise for a museum store for their gift shop. And this is actually my drawings. It looks like a photograph, but these are actually what comes out of the computer in my bespoke computer software that we've developed for my art.
Wow, wonderful. So how did you get to the kind of sculpture you make? Because it's unique. I mean, there's not a lot out there.
Well, I did not go to art school. I went to Harvard University. I am the child. My grandmother became a lawyer before women had the vote.
Wow.
And so everyone dreamed that I would become a lawyer and become, the first woman on the Supreme Court,
Sure.
And it turns out I'm a slow reader and have no I just don't have a brain for that kind of thing. So I actually just fell into my first art course in college, mostly because it didn't have a reading list.
Really? At Harvard?
Mm-hmm. So everything about my career is an accident. And I became a painter for about 10 years. Robert Rauschenberg curated the first solo exhibit of my work.
Wow.
Very interested in textiles because my mom had a dress shop, and I would pick up scraps and help. And so I just had a natural affinity for textiles. And after painting for about 10 years, I went on a Fulbright to India, where I was going to give painting exhibitions, and I shipped all of my paints and my brushes to make a series of paintings that would travel around the country. And my paints and materials never arrived. And so I was forced to embrace what I had on hand, and I was in a fishing village. And so I just started learning and taking methods and applying them in a way, I think, naivete, and not knowing the rules of sculpture. I didn't know it had to sit on a pedestal. I didn't know it had to stand up.
Yeah.
So they don't. And I keep learning, and it's an evolving practice.
Wow. I love the improvisation of fishing village. You're lucky you weren't in a coal mining village, you know?
Right. I'd be making like piles of coal, right? That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
that's great.
It's all happenstance.
The happy accident. Yeah. Well,
But
thank you.
what you probably don't know is that at this point, as the scale has increased, it's required me to be able to work with engineers because these have to meet the same requirements that a building has to in order, to be approved to be built over roads and property. So we have a whole team of computer scientists in Berlin and San Francisco creating proprietary original software.
Wow.
So that I never would have expected.
Especially not in the fishing village in India.
Yeah, all handcraft, yep.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Janet. Sebastian, we just met today. I mean, like 10 minutes ago, but I did cheat and read some things about you. You're from Colombia.
Indeed.
And you're in Qatar now. And what struck me most is your innately multidisciplinary practice. You're involved in architecture and art and public art.
It's called ADHD.
Oh, is that what it is? So I'm really curious about your work. The work you're doing in Qatar with public art. Can you tell us a bit what your role is and what your goals are?
Well, first of all, I've been for just a few hours in Saudi. It's my first time, even though I live next door. But I'm quite impressed. I'm super happy to be with all you all guys here and such a fantastic panel. So thank you all, Noor Riyadh and Pedro and Janet. Well, in a very multidisciplinary fashion, I would like to present a little bit of a split personality here. So some of the images that are rolling right now are of my personal work, but as a part-time artist, I enjoy very much also what I do when I'm not doing my own projects. I work with public art as well in the public art department at Qatar Museums, and I have a role that kind of sometimes is curatorial, sometimes goes into the project management and the technical part of things. So I just kind of wear a lot of hats, and I'm interested in this conversation I have with other artists, and I wanted to show a little bit of the backside of the non so glamorous shots,
like the graffiti.
Exactly, the graffiti, the cranes, like all this muscle that happens behind the work, because to me that's part of the environmental and history and footprint of the work and how it relates to the ecologies of places. And like that from a technical perspective, which is what I would like to limit my conversation with my collaborations with other artists. In my relationship, in my personal work with nature and ecologies is much more conceptual and let's say it's a more intimate conversation, and that's what I would like to kind of share a little bit tonight.
Yeah. So what project is this?
This is Shadows Traveling on the Sea of the Day, and a permanent Olafur Eliasson installation in the north of the Qatari desert. And this is Ernesto Neto.
Yeah, Ernesto, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's these pieces, as Sarah Forian mentioned earlier, and we were discussing it with Janet, there is a lot of bureaucracy, muscle, and stakeholders, and a lot of layers for these things to happen. And we usually see that photo or visit that place, but what happens with these projects, it's a long-standing conversation with the ecology of places. In Ernesto's, for example, I received a call from the conservator a couple of weeks ago. I was like, Sebastian, we have bird nests. in Ernesto's artwork, what do we do? And that goes beyond a conservation or a pest control situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? It's how this artwork is in establishing a conversation with the local ecology, and in a way that was absolutely unforeseen for even the artist. And then without even messaging Ernesto, I was just like, keep it, don't touch the nest, the nest. Yeah. And then I just sent me a photo, and then I sent a photo to Ernesto, and he was really happy.
I'm sure
he was so. It's how do we think artworks in time, especially permanent commissions, because there is no such a thing as permanence.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no,
so
no.
How do we, and that's a conversation we were having with Janet just right now.
And I was going to bring that up, Janet. You were talking about your permanent commissions and how you've had to really rethink it in terms of what's expected, in terms of at least lasting 20 years and replacing it, and how you've been able to in a way, hack the system to make your sculptures more dynamic by turning maintenance into a mechanism of change.
So my works.
Maybe studying the law stuff helps, right, to figure it out?
Oh, you just help explain that? Yeah. Well, just that the content of the work is about change, right? These works are not static. When the wind blows, they are changing patterns. They're constantly in very, very gradual flux. And I want them to change throughout the years if there are birds' nests in Ernesto's work. Or so in the United States, a lot of my early large commissions were government commissions. And they're funded by government bonds, which come with 20-year requirements, like the airport. And I want this work to be changing. And I have two kinds of materials that I build them out of. One is a permanent architectural fiber, PTFE, that they build the Olympics out of, or Beijing. But something like that has to be cleaned. So there's a lot of maintenance. And I think if it's going to require a lot of maintenance, I want that to be a performance as like part of the work. Mm-hmm. And I like the works to actually evolve over time. And so what I've developed is a way for the works to be built out of recyclable material. And I provide what in art, like if you build a house, you know that you replace the roof tiles every 10 years or 15 years. You buy a different tile based on when you plan to replace it. And so what I do is I design the works to change color over the years, so that as your children grow up, they remember the work when it was in its blue period and its violet period, and I provide all of the replacement parts, so I can do 20 years or 50 years, and they call it attic stock when you build your house and you have extra tiles or roof tiles, and so I have brought that concept to the permanent art commissioning world in a way that they didn't want to let it happen. So that has been a slow.
Yeah, because a lot of times they want what's in the render. They don't want it to change or evolve. Definitely don't want nesting. So how did you combat that? How did you combat change?
The title of one of my works is called "Her Secret is Patience."
Oh, okay, great.
Calm, thorough.
Put it in the contract.
Allay their fears.
Yeah. You get more if it's changing.
And it turns out everyone wants change. It's just that the structures within which we're working are not matching contemporary art.
Yeah.
If we were still commissioning horses made of bronze on pedestals, that would be just fine. Mm. But that's not what we're doing. That doesn't relate to life today.
Thank you. And Sebastian, how about in your position, when you're bringing artists to Qatar and taking them out into the desert, and how do you deal with change and nesting?
Pain.
Pain.
No, it's been like echoing what Janet was saying about these ideas of commissioning public works. They come from the commissioning of gallery works, where going to environmental things is the environmental notion of a gallery is a very static, protected, controlled place.
Yeah.
While the desert, the public space is alive and it's wild and it's changing,
Yeah.
let alone the desert. It's very complicated. So it's first like taking the artists around and showing them like what the environment is, and just kind of being very transparent in that sense of like, this is going to change, this is going to discolor, this is going to like, and we have two routes here, like this Simone Fatal piece. Mm-hmm. It's granite, so we know this is going to be there for almost ever, and that's why we decided to put it in a flooding plain. So this was absolutely intentional. We knew that area would flood, so we wanted to like the place to have this conversation with the environment and the seasons and the different cycles of the landscape. So that is one of the options, just like taking like material decisions that are unaffected by the environment, or like more or less, because we also get a lot of bird droppings in these pieces.
Yeah, sure.
And you know that it becomes part of the work at the end. The other one is, as Janet does, is just like embracing that change and trying to figure out things, and it's a learning curve. Like I've done a couple of projects with Olaf. The first one is Shadows Traveling on the Sea of the Day, and it was there was a lot of trial. I wouldn't say error, but a lot of trial and a lot of learning. And this is the second one. It's a temporary like desert installation, and we actually took a lot of the lessons learned from the other side and we applied them to this one. So in this one, the first thing we discussed about when we went into the commissioning process was like, okay, we need an environmental impact assessment before we jump into this project. Because now we know what happens when we have 120-ton cranes in a natural context. We know, like the artist goes to the desert seeing this like environment that's wild and untamed. And then when you have 6 months later, after having 20 people on the site daily and trucks, and it's not the desert anymore. It's like an anthropocenic
it's like
situation.
a construction site.
It's a construction site, exactly.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Like, and obviously the artwork is thought for this desert environment, and so we have developed like ways of like restoring that landscape to not its natural condition, because it can be its natural condition, but kind of embracing that conversation between the artwork, the process of the artwork, and the site.
Yeah. So the remediation has become very important.
Exactly.
To bring it back to as natural a position as possible.
But I mean, I have a background in landscape architecture, so
Yeah.
this is very important for me. Like the life of us, as Olafur likes to call them, the more than human inhabitants of the site, the plants, the little foxes that go out at night to hunt, and so we did in this case, for example, we did an ecological survey of all the species on the site, and we tried to have to minimize the impact of the artwork, both the installation and the operation of the artwork.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because we installed Alicia Quad's tunnel teller in the Crane Estate in Boston, and it was the first time she used these really large, like meter diameter steel tubes. And the first visitors we noticed were the raccoons, because we started to see raccoon marks on the reflective surface. So the raccoons were going over there and looking at themselves, and it was very gratifying. And this brings, so this idea of site specificity, right? And Janet, your work, it has site specificity, but then there's also tremendous flexibility, right? It's very adaptable. How do you manage that, the site specificity?
Well, and in a way, we could talk about the curatorial collaboration here.
Yeah.
And thinking about the ecology to include humans. Like, what happened here? This was originally going to be an urban piece.
Yeah.
And then it just didn't make sense. It couldn't structurally work. Yeah. And then the idea of being in the wadi and of bringing in these low majlis sofas is now an integral part. I list that as part of the materials of this piece.
Oh, wonderful. I wasn't aware of that. That's great.
That
Yeah.
it is a social structure, and it is embracing that change. When you come and when you sit on the majlis, you are part of this work.
Yeah.
Right? When you look up at the moon, that this idea of ecology and change, and what we were talking about, time.
Yeah.
Torres is a really important influence. Like the idea that a work of art is a piece of paper that says 75 pounds of butterscotch candy that people can take and be replenished. There's a generosity of spirit that the work exists and it can just breathe. And my work is breathing with the wind. It's always changing. It's different when the wolves or the Arabian red fox is howling in the Wadi Namar. Like, this is part of the work.
I was there when it was elevated, when they put it up, and it was windy, and that was the first thing I noticed, how it came alive, and I was really looking forward to that part of it, based on your project in Boston. And in Boston, though, it was in the middle of the city, over a park, over the Greenway, but it was really high up, at least 100 feet.
28th story.
Yeah, 28th story. So it was really high up, and so it was
7 cranes.
7 cranes.
And it shut down the largest highway, I-90, which runs the entire length of the United States. The mayor agreed to shut it down so we could install this 2 city block long, 600-foot, 200-meter sculpture.
Yeah, but it was so high that it had a very different quality. Here, it's only like 4 meters above, so you can really see it. You get the net quality. It's a totally different experience. It's intimate, and then the seating area. Just so you know, I couldn't get my family out of there. My family was here. And
that's the test. If the work is good or not.
Well, you pass
whether you're kids.
Yeah, you passed the teenager test. My teenage boys definitely loved it and sat under there, and didn't want to leave. So it did create a very comfortable, intimate, and I have to give credit. That was not my idea. That was proposed to me by the team, who said, we should put this under there. And I thought, that's perfect. But I do, I think that I'm so glad that you're pleased with that.
Well, it was not my idea. But now it's an integral part of the discovery of the site and the work, and the people here are part of that.
Yeah. And can you tell us a bit about the title of the piece?
Yes. Sometimes I get questions, what is the numerical title? Like, this is 1.26. It's a measurement of time. And there must be a script, because the Saudi TV interviewer is like, I hear this piece is about an earthquake.
And someone asked me if it was about an earthquake.
So there's clearly a script. I use data sets to inspire the forms. And the meaning of that is that they're looking at data sets of how one thing impacts another thing that we don't fully realize or understand. The works are about interconnectedness. The knotted mesh structure, when one part moves, every other part is affected, whether you wanted to or not. And that particular data set is the earthquake in Chile. And it's the Pacific Ocean, and it's the measurements of wave heights as it reaches to every part of Asia and Australia.
Oh.
And so it's because I got a call from the Biennial of the Americas, and they wanted an artist to speak to the interconnectedness of nations.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I didn't know, what to do, and there had just been this tragic earthquake in Latin America.
Yeah.
And so that interrelatedness seemed like the metaphor that really spoke to the work.
Wonderful. Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you. And Sebastian, the Gulf is a very specific place, a very misunderstood part of the world for those of us who are not from here.
Like Latin America.
Yes, like Latin America, yes, but we're from there, so it's different. But you're right. You're right. I can't tell you how much. Yes. So in working in this context, right? How has that affected your work?
I mean, now I'm going to switch to my personal work because I think this is a question that I'm better equipped to respond from that more intimate perspective. So, in that line of thought of the Gulf being a place that's misunderstood and othered very often, I found a certain level of comfort coming also from a culture that's often othered, and then I guess that has helped me challenge the notions of sight, because I do works that are highly intimate, highly personal, in a context that couldn't be more environmentally far away from the place I come from. I come from a city in the Andes, in a very lush green place in the mountains, and I'm at sea level in the desert. Yet, I have found this notion of sight that's not necessarily connected to a geographical location, but kind of a set of socio-cultural, political entanglements, and actually the piece with the in the sea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a performance piece I did that came across once. I was looking for flights to go home. I came across Google giving me a flight time, a direct flight from Doha to Medellin, which is a flight that doesn't exist. There's no direct flight.
Oh.
So I was fascinated with this. It was like 14 hours, something, 16 hours, 12 minutes. And I get fascinated with that, and this kind of fictional connection between these two places that was physically impossible. And I created this raft, a round raft, that was
here it is.
this one,
Yeah.
uncontrollable in the midst of a political blockade. And I throw myself in the water, floating adrift in an endurance performance for these 16 hours, 12 minutes, if I'm not wrong. And that was the piece, and it was about connection. It was like so I like to say that this is a public piece, ephemeral, a public piece only for myself. Although I was connected with the world through WhatsApp, because I was also thinking of the refugees, of the exodus, of movement. These are topics that, being away from home, are become something I see reflected in others and myself. That's another piece that has a heavy interaction with the environment.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Covered in what are you covered in?
Some sequence.
Sequence.
Yeah.
A sequence suit.
Yeah, I had a performer, like a Tunisian karate champion,
Oh, okay.
and 2 days before the performance, he said like, oh no, it's too cold for me.
Oh,
And then it was like he was not afraid of anything but cold. And so I ended up performing the piece without no preparation. But
wow.
it was,
The water was too cold.
the water was cold. It was in winter, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I just think that's very funny because I'm from California and the water here is very warm. So,
well, in around December, January, it gets
Yeah.
quite chilly.
okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
anyway, so yeah, that's like how I kind of make sense of this idea of site environment and how I relate to this place, sometimes by not even relating to the place as we understand it physically or geographically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've said this quite a bit, but I will say it again that you know we're all sort of biased, right? We read information, we know things, and so when I first arrived in Riyadh, it was I think the first or second day of Ramadan in March. And I didn't know what to expect, and I was coming from Japan, and I realized, you know, I know Japanese food, I know certain phrases, and it became clear to me that I was much more familiar with Japanese culture and navigating Japan than I was with navigating Saudi Arabia. I didn't even know how to say thank you. It took me a while, I don't know why, to get comfortable with saying shukran. And then I realized that this is also not at all the country I expected. It is not the country I read about. It is not anything like what I was led to believe. And this was a big surprise. But I guess I should be surprised because it's also what many Americans who go to Mexico City for the first time will tell me as well. Like, wow, it's such a big city, and there are so many cars, you know, and you know, it's been one of the biggest cities in the world for a long time. So I would love, you know, in terms of that sense of surprise of being here, because we are here, and you're working here for a while now, and Janet, this is your first time, in Riyadh. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you'd worked in Jeddah before. That's right. So I'm very curious if you could respond to this idea, each of you, in terms of surprise, right? In kind of how we come with baggage of preconceptions and bias and break them down and are able to work in these places. Does that make sense? Is that, yeah?
I might direct that towards my surprise at the new site here in Wadi Namar. Because I was expecting an urban city piece.
Yeah.
And I was bowled over. And it made me think about time in a way I had not imagined. Like suddenly I was thinking about 100 million years of water pushing through that, like the time period, and look, you know, the sky and the desert and the obvious erosion that had created the wadi, and this, you know, like things that were much bigger than the political coverage in the New York Times of Saudi Arabia, of golf and car races, and you know, suddenly it was like a much bigger perspective shift.
Yeah.
And that has been very satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's nowhere else in the world you can see my work like you see it here.
I am so happy, you're happy, because when that site, you know, materialized, when I realized we can put it here.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. The
role of the curator as a co-creator with the artist.
No, but I was super excited, and I thought, you know, this idea, because you know Wadi Namar, there's a part that's quite congested. There's a lot of movement, a lot of people, and you're in the more kind of isolated part. and it is about 300-meter walk, but you can see it, and you can feel it, the bit of the light, and there's this really wonderful reveal where you come around the corner and there it is. And then that really pulls you. And that was the idea, to have your work pull people in. So I'm glad.
And then
worked.
offer them hospitality. It's like, it's like the history of coming to a tent 100 years ago. Like you walk hundreds of meters to get to this artwork, and then you discover someone has put a majlis for you to sit down and relax underneath the artwork. Like, it should be generous.
Yes.
And so I love that about it.
Oh,
Thank you.
As do I. Sebastian?
I'm that question actually really hits home because I have found surprise of all things in the commonalities, the cultural, political commonalities, rather than the differences. Because the differences, you do see them in the newspapers, or you see a photo of the desert and you say, wow, this place is just so different, yeah. But you come and see it and say, oh, wow, it is like in the photo. So, I mean, it's much more dramatic, but still, you were prepared for that. But what I found commonalities is in a culture that's supposed to be completely different. I find in terms of like the hospitality, like it's something that feels very familiar. And then we have this long, like, historical connection from the Levant to the Maghreb to Spain, and from Spain to Latin America. And there is like connections in terms of food, in terms of word, linguistically.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wait, someone is speaking Arabic and I just understood 2 words.
Yeah.
And even the social issues, we have a lot of parallels now with the really awful and unfortunate situation in Palestine. I can't help but think of the forced displacements in Colombia. We had a lot of that in the last 60 years, and like, I see that, and I know how it feels because I've seen it. So like, it really affects me in that sense, and I feel a sense of connection with the region and the culture from the beautiful small connections of finding the same street food in the Caribbean coast of Colombia and a Lebanese restaurant, to these bigger issues of displacement and violence that we, like, both cultures have struggled with.
Yeah.
So that's something that creates a huge sense of wonder, and like, it's like, well, we're actually closer than we thought.
No, and that's beautiful. Thank you for saying that, because
And that actually influences my work a lot in that sense, because I'm sorry to just
No, please,
cut you
continue.
off. I talk about, like, movement and displacement, but I'm not talking about me living halfway across the world, or like the displaced people in Colombia because of the paramilitaries at that point. I'm talking about people in Myanmar. I'm talking about people in like climate refugees. Mm-hmm. And one of my pieces is just kind of like this house made out of like boxes and suitcases and luggage in waterfront, thinking of all these movements that, again, the ecological conversations with these human ecologies, natural ecologies, and so on and so forth.
No, thank you for that, because Colombia, Mexico, we are characterized as these very violent countries. We have a shared history, an intimate relationship with the narco trade, and I think we're there's a lot of misunderstanding around that, and so thank you. But also I saw the same thing. One of the things that really is very funny, which might be shocking to Saudis, is that we also have shawarma. It's called trompo in Mexico, but it's pork. And it's cooked the same way, and it's cut the same way, but it's pork. It's never chicken, it's never beef. It's pork. And
We do lamb in the Caribbean coast of
oh,
Colombia.
you do lamb. You do lamb.
Came through the Syrian, Lebanese, Shami people who migrated at the turn of the century.
Ah, wonderful.
And we call them Turks.
Turks,
Because,
yeah.
because they came with an Ottoman Empire passport.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
Even though they are Arabs. but
They're
we
Arabs,
call them
yeah,
Turks.
yeah. So there are many similarities, and actually, yeah. So thank you for saying that, because you're right. There's a surprise, and there are the differences that we're reminded of and made aware of constantly, but in reality, there's a lot more commonality. So. Well, I think our time is up. I want to thank you all for coming and listening. Thank you to our panelists. This was lovely.
What a delight, neighbor.
Yeah, neighbor. Yeah.
I would like to say, like, close with something that's really interesting, that talking about cycles, and like how you guys are like neighbors, and then just like all goes full circle.
We met here. No, we met
met
before.
once in Boston. Yeah.
So
we
it's
met
not
once.
like it's, a small town in that sense. But
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, I was working on some public art projects in Doha, and we were like really interested in commissioning Janet at work.
Oh.
And we were about to start contacting artists, and then like oil prices crashed, and like projects got defunded left and right. And of all places, I almost didn't make it to Saudi yesterday, but then I was like, wait, Janet ended up being in the panel. It was like a change, and so how like all these cycles kind of came full circle tonight, and your connection there, and this connection with Janet that never actually existed, but then it just like we ended up connecting things here, and I think it's very pertinent in this idea of ecologies, because at the end we are all connected in like in Janet's work.
Yeah.
We're all little nuts in this whole installation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pedro.
Thank you.